to show you guys the ZipForms library today. And I also want to open this up to general tech questions around ZipForms. As well as obviously general questions always. So let me just start by getting into ZipForms. Kind of a light crowd today, that's okay. So we're in ZipForms and it brings you right to your transactions. I'll create a new one just to kind of go through that again in case there's any questions on how to create a transaction folder, even though that is not the intent of today's training. It doesn't take me long just to start from the beginning. So you go to new, and then you'll go to the transaction type. So you'll have new listing or new offer to purchase. I'm going to do new offer to purchase here for this purpose of today's training. You're always going to name your transaction folder. I'm just going to say compliance training clause library test. You're going to pick under category. You're going to pick the type again. So residential is what we're going to 9.9 times out of 10 be choosing. Then templates. So again, we all have access to the global templates. These have been created for you guys to apply. If you apply a template to your transaction folder, it will automatically populate the transaction folder with the most commonly used contracts that we use, depending on the type of transaction we're doing, whether it's a listing or a new offer. So I'm going to pick global residential offer packet here. And then we're going to hit save. And it should bring us right into the transaction folder. So we've got a summary page here. We've got the parties tab. We have our documents tab, which you'll see here. These are all of the most commonly used forms. So we've got the buyer agency agreement, the offer to purchase, the addendum A, the disclosure to customers if you are not acting as a buyer's agent, notice relating to offer to purchase. So this might come into play for you. It might not during the transaction. So we just have it populated here just in case. Again, same with the amendment to the offer to purchase. It might be likely that you'll use an amendment when you are doing your inspection negotiations. It might be the case that you don't need to use an amendment at all, but we have it here for you. We have a counteroffer form here for you and a blank addendum here for you, which we have automatically, nope, we don't have it automatically populated, but I'm going to use this to show you our ZipForms library in a second. We're going to go back. We've got our new affiliated business disclosure and our KW disclosure, which these are two required documents for our transactions. We've got the home warranty. You can use whatever home warranty company that you want, but again, we need to get this waiver filled out if there is not a home warranty as a part of the transaction, regardless. And then we've got the addendum IC, and then we've got our buyer acknowledgement of risk when not having an inspection. Hopefully these two forms are kind of on their way out now that we're seeing more inspections being built back into our offers. Thank the Lord. So these might become more and more obsolete and less used. So what I want to show you guys though is our ZipForms clause library. So, and just kind of go over the most commonly used clauses. So when you're editing your contracts. It's just taking a minute. And excuse me, I have a cold, so I might be blowing my nose for a couple times here. Um, so when we are filling out our forms, we've got our buyer fields, the address fields, the purchase price fields, things that would be included in the purchase price. But sometimes we need to insert extra language. So we'll use our additional provisions fields on the last page of the offer. You're gonna click in the field, and whenever you go to fill out one of these fields, you'll see that a little pencil icon pops up. When you click that, and you click the little scroll, that little note paper, that brings us to another pop-up that gives us our clause library. So if you want to auto-populate a clause into the offer to purchase or an addendum, you would use this. So it's divided up into categories. So we've got offer to purchase. We've got clauses for notices. We have clauses for the amendment to the buyer agency agreement. We have clauses for the rental listing. Now, again, we've created these based on most commonly used languages or additional provisions that we have. So there are times when you might have an additional provision that you need to indicate in the offer to purchase, and it might not be in this library. You are still free to type what that additional provision might be. But again, these are the most commonly used. So I'm going to go to keep on offer to purchase and go to the clause title. So when I hit this drop down, excuse me, I'm going to go back up. Oops. Trying to move my taskbar here. So when we hit this drop down arrow, we've got our whole list of clauses here. So we've got radon test amendment, inspection amendment, radon test amendment again, financing contingency satisfaction, buyer home warranty waiver, business day deadlines, closing location, additional condo association documents, escalation clause. I'm going to highlight this one for sure. Final walkthrough, a clause that you would use regarding commission when you're doing a for sale by owner. I'm going to point this out as well. Licensee as a principal purchaser, removal of bump clause, right secure, selling as is, and subdivision regulations. So let's see here. I'm going to do the right to cure language. So let's say you are writing an offer, you're including a inspection contingency, and we have given the seller the right to cure. Within the body of within the language of the inspection contingency, I'm going to actually go back up to that so you can see what's missing from here and why we have additional language around it. So in the body of the inspection contingency language, it says here that if the seller has the right to cure, they must cure the defects in a good and workmanlike manner. For some, that is not specific enough. There's a lot of gray area here on workmanlike manner. And if there is a buyer who wants to make sure that if the seller exercises their right to cure, then we want to make sure that they are using licensed contractors with the benefit of a permit, and just making sure that we have an extra layer of insurance for our seller or for our buyers to make sure that if the seller does elect to cure when a notice of defects is delivered, that is going to be done using licensed contractors. So, for example, last offer I wrote, we gave the seller right to cure, and I added this language down here. So I'm going to go back to additional provisions. I'm going to go back to this little pencil icon, go back to the little note. Excuse me, you guys, thank you. Clause title, we've got right to cure. And the language will pop up. So I'm going to insert, right down here is the green button to insert. And now it states seller shall have the right to cure in a good and workmanlike manner. So now it's just going to expand on that provisional language. Using professional licensed experts with the benefit of permit as required and in accordance with municipal building code and generally accepted construction and safety standards. The scope of work shall be defined by an independent third-party expert, either a structural engineer or a roofing consultant, etc. So again, this would just come into play if that notice of defects is delivered. And then beyond that, if the seller elects to cure, then this is how the buyer wants to see that those defects cured. Again, using professional licensed experts with the benefit of a permit. So it's, as you can see, expanding upon that workmanlike manner, which can leave a lot of gray area on whose definition of workmanlike is, right? So that's why we have this. The next, and I just found out this morning that I have to serve a notice of defects on an offer of mine from the same example that I used. So we'll see if the seller elects to cure or not. And they have to make sure that if they do cure, they're going to be using a licensed expert to cure the foundation issues that we have. So, all right.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's all right. Welcome.
Thank you.
The next most commonly used clause would be our escalation clause language. So when we are using, or when we are writing an offer and our buyers would like to employ an escalation clause, that language is lengthy. We can put it in the additional provisions here on an offer or using the additional provision lines on the addendum A. But we have found actually that just using a blank addendum is better. So we've got our blank addendum here already populated in the transaction folder. I'm gonna load this up. Always takes a minute. And now I've got this blank form that I can use to populate that language in. So we have a spot here to label our new addendum. So it's an escalation clause. So we naturally label it as addendum EC. You're going to fill in the offer to purchase date. You're going to fill in the address. And then here, again, we're going to go back to the little pencil icon, the little scroll. We're still working within the category of offer to purchase. The clause title is escalation clause. And now here we've got the language. So we're going to go to the green button and insert. Now we still need to manipulate this language. And I'll go over and read it. So if the seller receives any other bona fide offer to purchase in the property prior to, and generally you are mirroring this date with what you have put for your binding acceptance date. So let's say we're writing this offer today and we're going to give them 24 hours until tomorrow. We'll say 11/8/2022 with a net price, purchase price minus any monetary contributions or credits by seller equal to or greater than, and then here you're going to put what that initial offer price was. So let's say we're offering, actually I just wrote offer over the weekend that included an escalation clause. The house was listed for 305. And the buyers wanted to just offer 305. So in here, I'll put 305. Buyer agrees to pay XXX more than said net price. So this is where you're going to put your increments. So this buyer said that they were willing to pay $1,000 over any other competing offer by $1,000. I just said more than said net price up to a maximum amended purchase price of, and then here we've got our max price that the buyer is willing to spend. So these particular buyers, this hit every single check box of theirs. They wanted this house badly. I don't think that it was even necessary for them to do an escalation clause, but they just wanted to make sure that they were going to get this house. So they said to me, we want to go in at 305, but we're willing to pay up to 315 if they get another offer between 305 and 315. So in here, then I will put 315. If the seller within 2 days of receipt of such other offer delivers a complete copy of such offer directly to the buyer and not in care of the broker, that's key, by approved delivery method per the offered purchase, buyer agrees, buyer will upon such delivery and in compliance with this accelerator clause, execute an amendment to the offer to purchase to show such increased purchase price. Seller may initiate such increase in purchase price only once. By initialing below, each party acknowledges that they have received, read a copy of and agreed and are bound to comply with this addendum. So this seller did not receive another offer, so they accepted the offer and it just remained at 305. Had they received another offer at 308, 309, then the offer to purchase price then would be amended to that $1,000 increase. So let's say they had received an offer at 310, then the new offer price would be 311, and we would have amended that offer after my buyers had received a copy of the competing offer to prove that there was another offer above the 305. So this is the form that you would use for that. Again, you know, I think we're coming into a market where these things are not going to be employed as much. But you know, like in this case, these guys just really wanted to make sure that they were going to get this house. So we decided to do this, and they brought it up to me because we had done it last year on a house. And it worked. It was great. The sellers knew they were serious and was very happy. And there's still tools that can be used. Just again, with this market, they're probably not going to be employed as much as they were, you know, in the past 2 years. But I just want to be here to inform you that you have this ability and this tool to use. The next most common clause in our clause library is, and I'm going to go to the notice relating to offer to purchase now, is for condo doc receipt. So I just actually had a question about this in my email before I hopped onto this compliance training. We have an agent who's looking for the condo doc receipt form. We don't have an official condo doc receipt form. We have that language built into our clause library again. So if you are working with a condo buyer, and you know, either party can initiate the condo doc receipt. But if you are a buyer for the buy side, and we're filling this out, we'll strike this notice we'll strike seller so that we leave buyer, relates to the offer dated, and then we'll go back to our original offer to purchase date. It requires the offer to purchase written date and the accepted date. Requires the address, of course. And then we'll go to the main body of the notice. We'll click our pencil, we'll click our little note scroll. And we're gonna go to category notice. The condo doc receipt is not in here. Maybe it is in here.
Yeah, I just saw it because I got the same question from that agent and I found the
Oh,
full
is it-
disclosure. Condo disclosure. I don't know why it's not showing up, but it
yeah.
was under notice and it was called condo doc disclosure. Condo disclosure.
You know what? I'm working in the Lake Country. I'm working within the Lake Country ZipForms library, and I wonder if we don't have it populated.
Okay.
Which very well could be the click case. So, 1 second here. I do want to show you guys this one.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to explain this today because I
Okay, let's go back. Thank you for your patience. Is there any questions as I'm doing this? Okay. All right, so now I'm switching over to the North Shore Library. For those of you Lake Country agents, we'll get this populated. I didn't realize that we never had that. So I'm just gonna click into this Lindsay test transaction folder. We'll go to notice.
did it under the new library. I don't know whether it was.
Oh, yep. Condo disclosure materials receipt.
Okay.
I knew it was there. So we've got the language populated here in the pop-up box. We're going to hit insert. And how this reads is the undersigned hereby acknowledges receipt of the condominium disclosure materials. It is recommended that before signing this receipt, the undersigned review all disclosure materials received to assure they are in accordance with the disclosure materials agreed to in the offer. So that's just stating, making sure that we have all of the condo documents required, as stated in the offer to purchase. Per the Wisconsin WB 14 condo offer to purchase, buyer has 5 business days from receipt of disclosure materials to request any missing documents from the seller. So
Yeah, didn't we used to have a form though? I remember a form that listed all of the documents and it says you acknowledge receipt of.
I don't think we've ever had a
Maybe that was my old company.
might be.
That's what I kept looking for and I couldn't find it.
So what this does is it puts a timestamp on the condo doc materials, the receipt of the materials. So again, this is an important part of the condo offer to purchase. Once the buyer has all of the condo docs required, and then any additional documents that they might request in the additional condo doc contingency, which is a new contingency in the offer to purchase. Then once they have received all of them, then they have 5 business days to review all of the condo materials. And if they so choose, they have an opportunity to declare the offer null and void if there's anything that they see in those condo documents that they don't agree with or don't feel comfortable with. So it's important to have a timestamp on this on all sides. So once you receive all of the documents, then the buyer is going to sign this and we're going to send it back to the listing agent so that they have a copy of it. And then the clock starts from there. So this this can be signed by the buyer if they don't have all of the materials. Maybe we thought we had everything. This is signed and delivered. And if during this period we discover that there are more documents that we don't have, the buyer has the ability to, via notice, request all of the missing documents. And then from there, our 5 days will start over again once they receive those. So it's important to get this filled out when you're working with a condo buyer. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm sorry.
Is there a way we can get a list of the documents that we would possibly need to have?
So you would just consult the offer to purchase. We'll go to condo. Offer to purchase.
It's down at the bottom.
Oh. So you're gonna consult. The offer to purchase, so starting at line 107, condo disclosure materials. Seller agrees to deliver to buyer within 10 days after acceptance. So this is giving the parameters for when the seller can deliver the documents to the buyer. Within 10 days after acceptance, current and accurate copies of the condo disclosure materials required by statute 703. The condo disclosure materials include a copy of the following and any amendments to any of these. So they'll always include the proposed or existing declaration, bylaws and any rules or regulations, proposed or existing articles of incorporation, proposed or existing management contract, employment contract, or other contract affecting the use, maintenance, or access of or all or part of the condo, projected annual operating budget for the condo, including reasonable details concerning the estimated monthly payments, leases to which the unit owners of the association will be a party, general description of any contemplated expansion of condo, including each stage of expansion and the maximum number of units, unit floor plan, and the executive summary. So all condos should have access to all of these.
And a lot of agents add minutes, like for the last 3 months or something.
Yeah, so this is the, like, we'll call this kind of like the baseline condo docs that one would receive. If the buyer wants anything beyond that, then we're going to scroll down to line 149 and we're going to make it the offer further contingent upon receiving additional materials. So starting at line 149, this offer is contingent upon the seller delivering to the buyer at seller's expense within 10 days after acceptance of this offer, the information listed below that exists as of the date on line 1 of the offer. So this gets tricky. As a listing agent, when you receive this, you're going to have to make sure that all of this additional materials are available. They might not be. There's a caution line right on line 165 for listing agents and for sellers. Really, I mean, it's for the seller, but we need to pay attention because of not all of the listed materials may exist or be available from the condo association. Seller may wish to verify availability prior to the acceptance of this offer. So if, for example, I don't have minutes of the last 3 unit owners meetings, then we might want to strike that and counter that back to the buyer, saying we can supply 8 out of the 10 of these items, but I don't have this available. So I'm going to strike that to make sure that I'm not trying to find information that's just not available. So you'll just need to be mindful of that when working with condo offers. Another thing too is if this gets accepted and then you discover that again, the minutes of the last 3 unit owners meetings are not available, then I would amend the offer and to remove that line. It gets detailed. Working with condos there's just a little bit extra work with condos.
I have a question, Steph. Several listing agents of condos are putting all the documents in their documents in MLS. So the agent has access to the documents before they even write an offer. What is the procedure, the best procedure to say you've received those documents? The contract says after accepted offer.
Right. I think the best would be to request the buyer in the additional provisions, the buyer's agent to write in the additional provisions that this buyer has receipt of these disclosure materials, and then the timestamp could begin upon acceptance. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've seen it where they just ignore it. They ignore the posted documents and expect to have the documents sent upon accepted offer. Freshly to their.
Yeah. I don't think that's a bad idea either, just to either or,
Yeah, right.
I can see how, it's like we want to supply these things to give everybody this information right away, but
I think unless they acknowledge it in the offer, that timestamp could be anytime. It could be 2 weeks before they even wrote the offer on that condo.
right.
And so that's what makes it iffy, is that the actual time that they receive the documents, like a week before they wrote the offer. I think the buyer has to clarify that in their offer, that
Yeah.
on acceptance, buyer to get their required documents.
Well, I think that, best practice as buyer's agents, if we have everything, to include language that buyers in receipt of all condo doc materials, 5-day business rule begins upon acceptance of offer. Or as you said, if as listing agents, we don't see that language, then we'll just go ahead and send it, right, on day 1. Another thing that could be written in there is if the buyer acknowledges and receives those condo documents and has already reviewed them, could go ahead and say that they don't need to exercise their rescission rights.
Right.
So I think coming from the buyer agent perspective, I think we would want to leave those rescission rights in there, right? And it could be an acknowledgement that they are in receipt of them, but we also don't know exactly. We don't know if we have everything sometimes.
Right.
So,
and you don't know you don't know what to put in your offer. I mean, if you've added the additional documents in your offer, that means you want them all sent at the same time.
right. It gets
instead of having them dribble in.
Right.
I think the best thing is to request upon acceptance of offer, all required documents, including if you wanted something more.
Right. I agree.
And ignore what's in MLS.
Right. Yeah, I feel like we should get clarification maybe from the WRA on that too, because just because they're available there's no telling what can happen prior to writing an offer, so it's like, even if it's available in MLS, doesn't make that like an official delivery in my.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the key.
Yeah. So hopefully we've cleared that up for you guys. I don't think we're clear on it.
Right. Clear as crystal.
Right. I I would still be requesting requesting delivery as Joan said. So if they are in MLS, a lot of times people are only loading like the executive summary, which just is kind of like what is most important to a buyer at the time of writing an offer, like just hitting those key bullet points of like, can we lease it? What are the are pets allowed? And if so, what are their restrictions? You know, kind of those hot button items that a buyer's really concerned about. So okay, let me move on then. The other most commonly used, when you're writing an offer on a for sale by owner, and the seller has agreed to pay our commission, we need to include language in the offer to purchase regarding compensation. And again, this is only for sale by owner. Load this. So we're working within the offer to purchase category. The clause title is for sale by owner. Where is it here? Here it is. I'm going to insert. So on behalf of the buyer, seller agrees to pay blank percentage of the purchase price or blank. And that's where you would put a flat fee if that's what the seller has agreed to compensate the brokerage with to Keller Williams Realty at the time of closing to be applied toward buyer's brokerage fees. So depending, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a percentage. So, you would just populate what the seller has agreed to. So seller agrees to pay 2.4% of the purchase price. Then I'm going to erase the second half of this because it does not apply. Seller agrees to pay 2.4% of the purchase price to Keller Williams Realty at the time of closing to be applied towards buyer's brokerage fees. So you must include that when the seller is compensating the brokerage. Because they're not represented by a listing firm. This is why we need to include this in the offer to purchase itself. Otherwise, we are not addressing the compensation in the offer to purchase when it is between two firms. We use a separate form for that.
So is the 2.4 pretty typical for FSBO as well, or is there more because maybe we're going to be we're guiding the seller in some ways?
Yeah, I wish. No, that's like a totally valid point, because when you're working with for sale by owners, you're doing double the work, really. If you can negotiate that, absolutely. The handful of times that I've done a for sale by owner, I've been able to successfully negotiate the 2.4%, but I've never gone higher. But that is absolutely if you are able to, fantastic. So,
well, in your case, did you then help that seller with the title company? I mean, like, direct them in any way, or did you leave the seller up to their own?
I've always asked the question, do you already have a title company in mind that you have identified that you want to facilitate the sale? Otherwise, I have resources, of course. Sometimes, I kind of make this comment a lot during these trainings. I like to micromanage the transaction to make sure that nothing's falling through the cracks. So if I can get the seller to agree to using a title company of my choosing, then I prefer that. So just because then I can have a direct line of communication and I can kind of help guide the process along. So but But yeah, I mean, I just kind of chuckling at your comment, because you're right. I mean, you are doing more work when it's a for sale by owner. You really are. So,
But that's where it's clear that you have to send that disclosure to customer to the seller,
yeah,
the for sale by owner seller, because he has to read, if he reads that and signs that, he has to be clear that you are not helping him with real estate negotiations or anything like that. That
right,
you're only negotiating for the buyer.
right. But there's still like, just, the contract to close details, like transaction paperwork and
Right.
stuff like that, but
Forms.
yeah. Because so much gets lost with just delivery. So, we want to make sure that we just kind of want to maybe take over that piece of it, just to make sure that those things are being taken care of. Like I said, nothing is slipping through the cracks. Excuse me. Okay, let me look at the clause library and see if there are. Oh, so for you investors and, or when you're writing on a new house for yourself, if you are acting as the principal purchaser and writing your own offer, there's language that we need to say, insert. So again, this is if you are writing an offer on a purchase for yourself. All parties understand that the buyer is a Wisconsin real estate licensee with Keller Williams Realty and consent to the buyer purchasing the property for residential or investment purposes. So here you'll strike one depending on which one it is. So let's say I'm buying a duplex for myself that I want to use in an investment property. I'm going to take out residential. I'm going to leave investment. It says strike. You could just erase it. For investment purposes, and that he or she may realize a profit from subsequent sale. Seller is aware that the buyer will be paid an incentive fee and consents to such payment. So what we're doing here is replacing the word commission with incentive fee. So when we're buying property for ourselves, how does it go, Joni, that we're just technically not supposed to be taking a commission, but we can take
We can't be an agent for ourselves, so we can't receive commission because we're not an agent.
got it. Okay.
So we have to accept a fee to Keller Williams. And then we get our portion.
Got it. Okay. So again, if you are writing for yourself, you'll use that clause.
Yeah, I think there's more that really should go in there. Yeah, there is.
Oh, this is the inspection contingency.
All right, but there should be more in that principle, if the agent is the principal, that they are not taking what's offered in MLS as commission, they're rejecting that, asking
Oh.
for incentive, all that. So I think there was a more juiced up clause for that, but that's fine unless somebody counters or challenges it.
Okay.
Because if it's not added that you're rejecting the MLS offered compensation and asking for an incentive instead.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not, I mean, I'm sure we've never seen it challenged before, but I see what you're saying. Let's see. I like this one. Okay, so for the inspection amendment, so we're past the point of an accepted offer. We're past the point of having our inspection. And now we are going to prepare our amendments from the buyer's agents. So we as buyer's agents are preparing our amendments to go back to the seller to make requests of the seller. So we'll use this. So this is just kind of an intro line. So the following shall be completed at the expense of the seller with all applicable lien waivers, invoices, and permits provided to the buyer no later than 10 days prior to closing. this kind of high number. I am usually using 3 days. Upon acceptance by all parties, the inspection contingency is hereby waived. So this would be the beginning of your amendment, and then from here, you would list the request. So all plumbing leaks repaired. And you can, let's see here, roof repairs per the estimate dated XXX from XYZ contractor to be completed. So, we're not discussing an inspection negotiations in this training, but like, I'm making references back to estimates that you may have received when you were starting to learn what exactly the extent of repairs that needed to happen. So how that next section of an inspection amendment is drafted is informed by the inspection report and then any follow-up inspections that have happened. But this is just good language to include from the get-go. And
I have a question. So if we didn't put the extra language in the inspection contingency in the original contract, can we add it here that it should be done by a licensed, bonded professional and with all permits
so
pulled, whatever?
if you are amending the offer, the amendment is able to dictate how and who and when the repairs are done, for sure. If you failed to include that language in the offer to purchase, where you are prevented from dictating how the repairs can be done is at the point of notice of defects. So it's different. So hopefully, the that language never has to come into play because we have not gotten to the point of a notice of defects. But because a notice of defects could be delivered at any time, that's why that extra like buyer protective language needs to be put in the offer to purchase in case a notice of defects is delivered and the seller elects to cure. Because if the notice of defects, you are not, as a buyer's agent, able to determine how these things get repaired. That's already written into the offer to purchase with that good and workmanlike manner. So if that language is not added on to, then it's up to the seller to determine good and workmanlike manner when that notice of defects is delivered. It's just, again, to protect the buyer, then we would add that extra good and workmanlike manner using a licensed contractor so that we could better assure ourselves that they're going to work with somebody who is a professional and not just a handyman. But an amendment. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I was just saying. So what I'm gonna say is that it sounds like it's too late to say that at the point of an amendment, because that's not the purpose of an amendment.
Well, it's just a different path. It's just a different path that you would be taking. So in that amendment, you are still able to, and 9 times out of 10, this is how you are negotiating it for your buyer, making sure that it is done with a licensed person, benefit of permit. Those plumbing leaks, for example, are going to be repaired via a licensed plumber with the benefit of a permit. So in that amendment, you are able to spell out for the buyer exactly how they want it to be taken care of. It's just, if you had gone the other route and the amendment was not happening at all, and you had gone the other route and a notice of defects was served, just on that notice of defects, you're gonna say the existence of plumbing leaks. But in that notice of defects now, because that was delivered versus the amendment, you cannot dictate how those plumbing leaks are repaired in that notice of defects.
So this is the first time I'm hearing to include that in the offer to purchase, because I have an inspection tomorrow, so that makes me nervous. But if I'm understanding correct, who serves the notice of defects, the buyer or the seller?
The buyer, it would always come from the buyer.
Okay, so if I serve that, or I should serve an amendment as opposed to a notice of defects if I want
Always.
to include that type of language.
It's just you could, that language can always be added, but buyer and seller would have to agree to it later on. And it's really hard to, this is why the inspection contingency is so difficult, because we're talking about two different ways that the inspection contingency can go. So when we're training on it, for example, like we always want you to attempt to negotiate the repairs via an amendment, and it dictates and you are mapping out how you want those repairs to be done, and buyer and seller are going to agree, and then you're all going to move forward. Now let's say that those negotiations break down, and buyer has proposed an amendment saying, I want these or I want these plumbing leaks to be repaired by this contractor. Seller doesn't agree. Now the buyer might then choose to say, okay, seller's not agreeing. Now I'm going to go to the notice route and say, Mr. Seller, you have to choose, you have to fix these plumbing leaks, or you have to let me out of the deal. Now, it's at this point where the language gets muddy, because in that notice of defects, you cannot map it out how the repair is to be done. You can only just list what is wrong. So all I can list there is plumbing leak. Now it's up to the seller to take that notice of defect and say, okay, we've got a plumbing leak in the offer to purchase. Now we have to go back to the offer to purchase and how it's laid out there. I can fix this plumbing leak in a good and workmanlike manner. So that means the seller can maybe do it. If they're, if they're handy enough, maybe they could do it. But the only language that we have to go back to is that original offer. So now with this notice of defects being delivered is kind of a gamble for the buyer. So that's why when we say, when seller has right to cure, we want to add that extra mapping out of how the repair is going to be handled. So let's say in our offer to purchase, we said seller can have the right to cure and cure in a good and workmanlike manner using a licensed contractor. So now that, let's say we did include that, and the buyer serves this notice of defects and says, there's a plumbing repair, there's a plumbing leak. And the seller now takes that and says, okay, now I have to go back to the offer, and that will dictate how I can fix this repair. Oh, shoot, I have to use a licensed contractor because that's how the buyer wrote it in the offer to purchase. So you know what? 2 days ago, I wasn't ready to agree to that plumbing repair. I really don't want to lose this buyer after all, so I'm going to elect to cure. And now I'm looking at my roadmap, and it looks like I have to use a licensed contractor like he originally requested. And so I'll call a licensed plumber and get it taken care of, and I'm going to keep him in this deal. So that's where it's different. It's kind of just like establishing how a buyer can, or how a seller can cure a defect. And you're adding that language here, but it might never even come into play. You're just giving that buyer an extra level of protection in case it does. So over here, we've got our amendment and we just want to make sure. Our goal always is that we're gonna come to an agreement between the buyer and the seller. And write out that roadmap for the buyer still, because. That language exists, but it's not really coming into play when we're using an amendment. We still have to map it all out on how a seller is going to repair those defects or repair the issues that we have. And we
Got
still
it.
want to be very detailed about it. Does that make
Got it.
sense?
Sounds like Leah and I both did not add that extra language in
Right.
our purchase contract. And we
Which is-
both have an inspection coming up this week.
So which,
And so that's why I want to make a special request to have that automatically inserted, just like the commission line.
so you can go back to so this is where, this is what you would do. You can go back and then you can include that language. You would have to, buyer and seller would have to agree to it now, I mean, this might be an offline discussion. If I wouldn't get too concerned, it's hopefully right to cure isn't even gonna come into play here. Hopefully it's not even gonna get down to that, right? So, you absolutely can though, go back to the seller and say, before we get to the inspection period, we do want to add this extra parameters around the right to cure if the seller elects to cure. The bigger discussion might be, is that smart to do that at this point? I don't know. Joni might have you absolutely can though. The seller, where the seller's prerogative though is they could say, I still just want to work within the workmanlike manner, good and workmanlike manner parameters, right? So that just might be your sticking point here. So
Yeah, I mean, if you're worried that you forget to put it in offers going forward, you can template your offer,
yeah,
create your own custom offer and have that already in there, as well as working only on business days and other clauses like that. You can create a custom offer to purchase so you don't forget some of those things.
yeah, I don't want you to I don't want this to trip you up with for this transaction, I mean, it's if you want to have question, if we want to talk offline about it, we can too. A lot of it has, I mean, does the house just in complete disrepair that you would have a concern about something like this, I also just want to drive home the point that when you're negotiating the repairs and you're doing this all via an amendment, you're still going to write and map it out for the seller how the buyer wants to see things done. So it's still in your control right now. It's still in the buyer's control.
Yeah, you explained that very well, Steph.
We can do another, Joni and I love talking about the inspection contingency, so we can do another training on it next week. Or sorry, next month. But yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of angles in the inspection contingency.
A ton. So, but I don't want you to get tripped up because you're not in any danger right now. That was dramatic language, but I'm gonna stop sharing.
Quick question.
Are there any questions?
If we do have the option to add that to an amendment if it came to it, if they opt out of that part of the amendment, say they agree to cure it, but not by a license, whatever, can that be a out for the buyer?
The seller refusing to sign an amendment agreeing to expand on the language of good and workmanlike manner would not be an out for them, no.
Okay. Okay.
You would, yeah, you would just perform according to how the language is already written into the offer.
Okay.
So, but why don't we talk offline? I just want to ease your mind, because a lot of, it's not that I'm not even writing this into every single offer to purchase either, so it's missed often, so I just don't want you to,
Okay, that makes me feel better.
yeah, I just don't want you to have anxiety
Yeah.
around this.
All right.
So,
I'm okay. Because I've definitely had some offers reviewed and they were okay with not having it in there. So it's not,
Yeah.
it's just that now that I'm hearing it, it's like, oh, now I see why that could be an issue.
yeah, oh, and this is why we do these trainings, so you can see.
Mhm.
So, okay, all right. I forget what we're working on next week.
I did too.
I could quickly look. Next week, we are doing financing and an appraisal contingency. Joan's gonna tackle that with us. Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.